All right, guys. Today we're going to learn a little bit about heat stress and exercise. Probably should have done this pre-summer. But I think I've had so many questions through the summer. I've discussed it on the podcast, discussed it on Instagram shows, but people just can't quite getting the message. So chat to you guys about it. Obviously it goes out on the film, and then you can chat to your guys about it as well and talk them through. So what I want to get you guys to understand today is the body's response to heat, the performance response, and then what we can actually do about it. So some practical applications that will help your clients to deal with the heat a little bit better. So in terms of the body's response, what the body's norm temperatures is 36.6 to 37.2 degrees Celsius. Anybody know when we're at our coolest state? What time of day?
First thing in the morning.
Yeah. So roughly 6 a.m. is the norm time that you're at your coolest point in the day. And then gradually as the day goes, you get hotter as it goes on. Age also affects it. Younger children, I think, are hotter, or generally body temps are hotter. And the older you get, the cooler you get. This is called homeostasis. So when the temperature of the body is between these two numbers, you're in what's called homeostasis, which means everything is all good. Once these start to deviate, so we're looking at core temperature here, then the body starts to respond, or it happens before it goes outside of these, but the body will start to respond puts measures into place to keep you cooler. So heat loss through radiation. This happens all the time. You can't stop this. When you are hot and the outside air temperature is cool, heat always moves to cool. So it's the law of physics that heat will always go to where there is something cooler, and that is happening with us all the time with radiation. Obviously this happens more when you're in a colder environment. That's why you get cold and you need to put on extra clothing, and it happens less as the environment starts to match your body's temperature, which here we get a lot of. So that's why we can be doing nothing, standing outside in 35 up to 40 degrees and feel just way too hot and just need aircon. So that's why certainly here we get a huge problem with like heat response, is because we're working on overtime anyway to just stay cool naturally before you've even started exercising. The next one is evaporation, which comes in form of sweating. So the body starts to shunt out water and electrolytes onto the skin. Cool air then moves over the skin, picks up the cool air from outside with the sweat evaporates, which also makes you feel cooler from it as well. This is why it's so important to rehydrate constantly here, because most of the time we're sweating anyway, and then you go outside and exercise, your sweat rate will just double up. That starts to stop around 4 to 6 hours after exercise. The body actually stops itself from sweating, over sweating too much, or it would just go outside of these norm temperatures.
Yeah,
12 hours of sweating, yeah. So if you are drinking enough, putting enough fluids back in, then you can keep evaporating for longer. So it's why it's important to have some sort of hydration protocol while your clients or yourselves are outside running, sweating. Also, because you're sweating electrolytes out, you need to have some electrolytes going back in. The next one is conduction. Anybody know the difference between conduction and convection? Rob Jones, you've got to know this, no?
I'm going to leave it open for people.
Convection is the motion of matter. So that is basically air flowing over our skin and heat coming out through the air, because our blood comes out to our superficial capillaries, which is why you get a lot more vascular in the heat. That blood is then taken through, the hotter blood can reach to the cold air essentially, and the heat gets pulled out of your blood and then goes back in to be cooling you down. Conduction is direct contact. So if you pick up something cold, it feels cold. but then after a while it will, like ice, will melt because you're putting your heat into it through contact. Or if it's something cold like a metal bar or something, it will eventually warm up to the same temperature as your skin. So they're the ways that we can feel cooler. They all have their pros and cons, but essentially we need all of them to work for us to stay cool, and that's why it's the main body's response to staying cooler. There is one other, and that is it's quite a cool one, that your hairs start to flatten down, because when your hair is up, it traps air between the hair and the skin, and that can then become trapped hot air, whereas one of the body's responses is to lie the hairs flat, and then there can be no air trapped in there as well. If you've got any hair left to have that done with. Ben, you wouldn't know about this one. All right, so that's how our body reacts to heat. In terms of performance, we see quite a big difference. So elite runners, you're going to see around a 2% difference in performance running in cool conditions, which tend to be around from 11 up to 20 degrees. And then non-elite, compared to cool conditions, will be up to 10% decrease in performance. So if we're looking at from an endurance side of view, out in like say a marathon or even doing 10K or 20K, that's like quite a significant difference to see. And the biggest thing we hear is, start of the year I was running an easy 10K in like 1 hour, say, and now I'm doing like an hour 5, hour 10, and it feels way harder. It's completely normal to see that. So first thing to make sure your clients are understanding is heat will bring your performance down. It's absolutely normal. Why we see less of a difference between the two, it's mainly due to these guys training longer in the hot conditions and getting their body to be better at dissipating heat. It's also a mental thing as well. So what we actually see, why our performance drops, is mainly based around the cardiac strain. So straight away, the body reacts to the heat and heart rate will go up naturally because it needs to push more blood out to the peripheries to get cooler. While it's doing that, you can't make more blood. So it can't keep giving your muscles the same amount of blood it needs to keep exercising, and it can't make more blood to shunt out to keep you cooler. It has to split its priorities. So heart rate goes up, mainly due to pushing blood out to the skin to keep you cool. That then means, though, that working muscles get less of that blood. That means your VO2 max will drop. So VO2 max is the amount of oxygen your body can take in and utilize within the 1 minute period. So if we have less blood to go to working muscles, naturally VO2 max is going to come down. If you're working aerobically, say around between 70 up to 75, some people 80% of your VO2 max, it's not that you're now working at a less percentage of your VO2 max, it's just that your VO2 max has dropped, so naturally the percentage of it has to drop with it. So if your aerobic pace tends to be 530 in, say, cooler conditions, it doesn't mean you've gone unfitter that you're running at 540, it just means you're running at the same percentage of your VO2 max, but the ceiling of it has dropped down. Stroke volume, SV here, stroke volume, initially goes up. So that is the amount of blood being pumped out by the left ventricle, which is obviously really important in terms of blood delivery system. That goes up along with heart rate to begin with, but then as other responses happen, it starts to drop. And this then obviously limits, again, this number of this VO2 max because you're getting less blood put out around the body. You also, all of that means cardiac output, again, goes up initially, and then starts to drop. And it's all a way of the body limiting its basically output so that you stay within this homeostasis law. If these carried on working as normal, the working muscle always wins. So your body won't say, okay, this working muscle, we're not going to feed it oxygen, we're just going to keep putting blood out to the skin to keep yourself cooler. It will deliver oxygen to the working muscle because that's the priority, and it will stop putting as much blood out to the peripheries to keep you cool, which will put you into overheating, and then you will either pass out, stop, or cease to exercise. So that's why this happens. It's basically a fail-safe for the body to calm down. Has anyone ever got so hot they feel cold? It means that you're going beyond this point, usually within your core temperature, and its body's basically getting confused signals and thinks you've actually gone too far the other way. So what you've managed to do is mentally beat this system. So, congrats.
You also believe in that thing he taught us last week. So.
Anyone ever passed out from heat?
I had hyperventilated.
Yeah?
That was after I got home.
After you got home?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you will eventually just pass out. So, what's interesting from this point of view, like we know this happens, that's fine. So essentially you've got to tell your guys or clients watching that your cardiac output is dampened due to the lower VO2 max. So just take it easier. Like looking at heart rate is fine. If you want to get a cardiac response, certain heart rate percentages, then yeah, look at your heart rate, but then don't think about your pace. Just exercise at what your heart rate is telling you and forget how it feels or how the pace is. If you're going for a pace-driven protocol, then you've just got to accept that that's either going to be slower or you're going to have to do more indoors in a cooler environment. You can't cheat the heat, is basically what we're saying. The other good point is your run mechanics aren't affected until obviously you've passed out or overheated, but that's a different reason. But in terms of running in the heat, it doesn't make a difference to your run mechanics. So this is important for us because what it means is you can split your guys' runs up into like 20 or 30 minute blocks and then give them 10 minutes to cool back down and then continue. So it doesn't actually mean that they're going to be running any differently. As long as you keep their core temperature down, then they'll still be getting a benefit to their run. Why it isn't affected? Because the working muscle is always prioritized for blood flow. So you don't see that much of a difference or any difference between people running fresh to running at the end of an hour, whether it's hot or cold conditions. What do you think the biggest influence of people stopping exercise is? So it could be VO2 max, it could be the fact their heart rate goes up too high, but the actual biggest difference of why people will stop exercising is their skin temperature. So that's kind of the first roadblock, is they could have quite a high core temperature, they could have a high cardiac output, but if their skin temperature is kept low, they will feel like they're okay and they'll continue to exercise. If this is kept submaximal and their core temp is kept within homeostasis, but you raise their skin temperature, people will stop exercising. So it's perception. Perception of heat is everything. So that's the biggest influence that has on our performance is skin temp.
So that's why when you're like really hot and you're running, you just pour some water over and you cool down.
You feel great for it, right?
Better.
Is that perception or is that actually?
Perception of.
You're perceptually cooling down,
So you feel better.
but the temperature isn't, and your core temperature won't be.
Is that the same with drinking it? Cold water over
Can be, yeah. So
normal temperature?
yeah, so I'm going to go into that next, is how we deal with it, and that is an interesting point. But what this says to me is people who are going out into the heat, and I'm speaking to clients, is yeah, you're hot, but a lot of it is to do with your head as well. If you're telling yourself you're hot, then you're going to be hot. If you are feeling hot, take time, get your skin temp cooled first. So cold water or something cold, like we'll go for this more now, but ice, holding on to ice or chewing ice flannels on your head, and then you can carry on, and it's not going to be a detriment to your running. It will be to your cardiac strain of the session, but we know that's already blunted. So let's focus on what you're actually trying to achieve from it, and just change it around slightly. Run mechanics won't be affected. You're not going to get injured from running in the heat. And the biggest thing to take care of, the biggest influence, is skin temp. So, dealing with the heat, we can look at this in 3 ways. Pre-cooling, which is before. Per-cooling, which is during. And then post-cooling, which is after. What do we think is the best way to pre-cool yourself before a run?
Don't warm up too much.
Don't warm up.
But don't like raise your body temperature too hot before you're actually gonna go in the heat.
Yeah.
Like, just do the minimum you need to do as a warm up to be okay, but don't do like loads of running before you actually go in the
But it's already hot. It's 30 degrees in here. So how do we pre-cool ourselves? Hydration can help.
Start first thing in the morning when your core temperature's already in its lowest.
Yeah, that can work. Best method, they call it mixed method, and it's basically using every possible way you can pre-cool. So sit in an ice bath with an ice slurry drink, with a cold ice hat thing on, drinking cold drinks in between your sips of ice slurry, first thing in the morning. So that is what they find the best way of cooling down your body temperature before you go for a run. Obviously, not very realistic, but if someone asks you what's the best way, that's what you can tell them. In reality, the best way, from what I can find, to pre-cool yourself is drinking an iced slurry. So in terms of real time, NutriBullet, put some ice in it, a little bit of water, add in some electrolytes, blend it, it will create an ice slurry. You want to drink that before you're going to do your run. So that is a really good way to tell your guys before they go for a run what to have. If you want to make it really nice, put in some like secret training mix. I had to say that. But that's a good one. Ice slurry with some training mix 1 hour before. That will get your core temp down, and then you go out for a run and you will feel perceptually cooler, and your core temp will stay a little bit cooler, at least for the first 20-25 minutes of your run. They've shown that to be a 6.5% improvement on performance compared to when not done. So if you go and do it, run a 1 hour time trial, and then you don't do it and run a 1 hour time trial, you will likely be 6.5% faster with the pre-cooling. Cool. Per cooling, so during, what do you think is the best way to stay cool while running? Cold moving air is the biggest way to stay cool. So when you're out running and it feels really hot, but you've got a nice cold sea breeze or something like that, like the temperature's hot, but you feel cold. So it's going back to sweating and evaporation being our biggest response to staying cold. In reality, is that easy to do here? No, it's not. So another very good way is, it's running with an ice vest, but not many of us own ice vests. Something that I've done lately is like a camelback, and then freeze the bladder in the back and run with that in your back, and then the ice will melt over like the hour, but that feels cool on your back. Or running with frozen bottles in your hand can help, and you can move it onto your neck and wrists, which are good areas to keep cool. But probably the best way for you guys to suggest to clients to stay cool during runs is with iced water and cold towels. So again, that comes back to perception of skin temperature. So you could say, okay, I want you to do a long run today, but every 25 minutes, loop back to a cool box that has ice with cold towels in that you can just take out, put on your head, pick up some fresh cold water and carry on again. They found that's going to be around a 4.5 to 5.5% improvement on performance compared to not doing it. So I think it's worth doing that. So that is what we should do or suggest for during exercise is iced water and cold towels. Cool. And combining both isn't shown to be better than one or the other. So if they can't do both, then just one of those is better than nothing, basically. When we're finished, obviously the body needs to go into a recovery or recovered state as quickly as it can. If its body temperature is staying high, then that will postpone the recovery effect from it. So post-cooling is actually just as important if you want to be consistently running through your week or exercising through your week in the heat, as opposed to the same as pre and per cooling. What's the best way to cool down post-run?
Ice.
Yeah. Ice bath or cryotherapy. In reality, best way to cool down is basically what you've done here, but afterwards. So have an ice slurry ready for when you get back, and then sip on ice cold water and put cold towels on you after your run to bring your body temperature back down and get back into your recovery mode, recovered state. Anyone not done this and continue to sweat for like 90 minutes after?
Fucking this guy.
Pizza sweats. Yeah, that is your body in a state of stress.
Because his hair comes down.
Is there a time frame on how cool you have to get or how quickly it should happen?
No, just basically get back to your norms as quick as you can.
Does the humidity make a difference in terms of oxygen, or is it just because it makes you feel good?
Yeah, no, there's no reduction in oxygen. There's always the same amount of oxygen in the air. Pressure is the difference. Say at like altitude, it's just less pressure bringing the oxygen into your lungs. Here with the humidity, there's the same amount of oxygen. It's just harder for your body to utilize it because of the cardiac response to it. That makes sense? So we know all of this, and then the last thing on practical applications is how to actually program for it. So naturally, you're going to have to reduce training either intensity or training volume. Like the two variables you'll always change within a training program, volume, intensity. Just with it, exercising in the heat, you have to do it a little bit more aggressively. My suggestion as well would be to take a perceived approach, so an RPE approach, because the biggest influence is skin temperature. If you're feeling hot, you will feel worse from it. If you're feeling cooler, then you'll feel better. So therefore, we could say to people, okay, I want you to do this on feel. If you feel like you're going over too much or it feels too hard, then just stop, slow down, work through the practical applications and get back onto it. Some people who love their numbers are the worst to train in the heat because they should be running at 5:30 pace and they can't because of absolutely normal reasons, and it completely messes with their head. They miss the point of what's actually causing it, and they feel like they get a bad session out of it, which, as we know as coaches, isn't true, right? We always just want people doing their best and getting on with the session as best they can. Make sure they understand to expect a decline. So understand what's going to happen to them and to actually expect to be performance to lower within the heat. And it's absolutely normal to be down by as much as 10%. It can go even more. It's not an excuse to not run or exercise outside. Obviously, we don't want to be killing people off by overheating them, but naturally the body will stop that from happening. But we know that, like run mechanics, for example, doesn't change. So it doesn't mean you can't go and run outside. A lot of people will choose to always run on a treadmill and then get burnt out maybe mentally or treadmill can cause sometimes issues if it's not a very good treadmill. That can then affect run mechanics and cause injury. So as long as we're smart, there's no reason to suggest people can't be going outside and continue their running journey with us or exercising. And then just making sure that they understand these just takes a little bit more admin. Just got to prep it a bit more the night before. You've got to remember to freeze bottles. You've got to remember to have a cool box and to stick some towels in it, and then maybe change your route slightly, leave cool boxes along the way, or loop it round with your car and back to it, and it can happen. We showed it on the weekend. We had, how many on the Saturday in the end? Nearly 20, 15? People all started at the bottom of the mountain in 31, 32 degrees and got to the top. No one passed out, no one died. And all we did was put in extra stops. What was it, every 30 minutes or so? And they got up there and we were all fine. Just took a little bit of extra admin from them as well. So that's it, guys. Hopefully that's useful. It helps understand a little bit more. We've still got another month of chaos, I reckon. So as long as you guys understand, use these practical applications, then hopefully keep moving forward. Thank you.